The next type of inheritance pattern is called codominance. And what that means is that when we look at a particular trait, the versions of that trait, also known as the alleles, will not be dominant or recessive, but in fact, both will be expressed when they are in combination with one another. An example that I have here is taking horses, like a red or a chestnut horse, crossing it with a white horse, and getting the possible Appaloosa horse, which is a brown spotted horse. And so we see that in the offspring, both colors of the horse's fur is present. And so we say that those are codominant alleles. So an example of this, again, just sticking with some monohybrid crosses, would be taking that brown horse, which would have that brown fur, so big B, and crossing it with a white horse, big W, big W. Now, this is written a little bit different because we are talking about a different type of pattern. And so, since it's codominant, we use two different letters. So, will these horses have any white offspring? It's a question that I'm going to pose. And to support your answer, it's always best to cross. So, when crossing the brown horse and the white horse, we see that in the Punnett square, we have all BWs. Well, a BW offspring has an allele that codes for brown and then an allele that codes for white. And so what we see is that there's brown and white. And we know when that's in combination with codominance, that's a result. So all of those possibilities will result in a horse like this. And so the results are 4 out of 4 possible chances, or 100% of all offspring will be brown and white Appaloosa horses, BW. So to answer the question, if there will be any white offspring, the answer is no. Moving on to our third inheritance pattern, which is sometimes similar and can be confused with codominance, is called incomplete dominance. What we see here is that the alleles that code for a particular trait will not be dominant or recessive, but will create a blending effect in the offspring when they are expressed together. And so we see this a lot with flowers, and I have an example using carnations. If a red carnation and a white carnation flower were crossed, they would produce offspring that would be a blended result of that cross. And so it's a lot like when you think about mixing colors, like in painting or any other art. When you mix red with white, it actually does create pink. And so we see that it blends. So let's look at a Punnett square example of this. A pink flowered carnation, which is written RW, so R represents the red allele, white represents W represents the white allele, giving us RW for pink, is crossed with another pink flower carnation. Will these flowers make more pink carnations? So, again, Punnett square is the same. We just separate our R and our W, and we do that on both sides. And we see here that when we cross two pink flowers, we can get one of every color, possibly. And we have here an RR, we have WW, and then of course we do get RW. So what does this mean? Well, we go over here in the results, and what we see is that 1 out of 4 possibilities will give us RR, which means the flowers will be red. 1 out of 4, or 25% of the offspring, could be WW, which means that they would result in white flowers. And 2/4, which is 1/2 or 50% of the flowers, will be RW, or pink. So the question in this problem said, will these flowers make more pink carnations? And the answer is yes, because of the offspring, about 50% of them could in fact result in pink flowers. So our fourth inheritance pattern, which is our last one in this presentation, refers to special chromosomes called the sex chromosomes. And so the sex chromosomes not only determine the sex of an organism, but these chromosomes will also carry genes. So when we look at the sex of organisms, typically we find that females will have 2 X chromosomes, which then will determine the female sex characteristics and among other things that make up female, and as well as various traits. For males, males will carry an X and a Y sex chromosome, and that's what makes males different from females. And like I said, the X chromosome and the Y chromosome are in fact chromosomes, which are made of DNA and will then therefore contain genes. Now, when we look at the genes that can be inherited on these sex chromosomes, we always must consider the organism's sex in the Punnett square. And I have a simple Punnett square here, just showing that if you were to cross a male and a female, what would be the resulting offspring, what would be their designated sexes? Well, when we look at this, we see that there is the possibility of 2/4 of this Punnett square being XX, or female. So there's a 50% chance that the offspring will be female. On the other hand, we have a 2/4 possibility that the offspring will be 50% male. So this will always be our pattern when we look at anything that is sex linked. Now, the traits will either be found on the X chromosome or the Y, never on both. And so on the next slide, I have an example of this. Color blindness is a vision disorder that means that a person cannot distinguish between certain colors. There's different types, but in the situation that I'm presenting, we'll just look at the red-green color blindness. And the picture just illustrates what a red apple and a green apple would look like to a normal person, or to a person that has normal sight, and then also to a person that has red-green color blindness. So you can see the difference. So this trait is inherited only on the X chromosome, and it is recessive, meaning that it is not dominant. So if we consider an example of a normal-sighted woman that is a carrier, meaning she is in a way heterozygous, marries a normal-sighted man. One thing I want you to notice is that when we write this genotype, we designate the allele for the trait on the sex chromosome as a superscript, because we are always tracking the sex of the organism. And so we have X superscript capital N, X superscript lowercase n, because this woman is a carrier. So there is the allele that could potentially create color blindness. And the man is normal sighted. So big N for normal sight. However, notice that the Y chromosome does not have any designated superscript. That is because color blindness is only on the X chromosome. We are not considering anything on the Y. So when we set up this Punnett square, it's very similar to everything that we've been doing. Okay? So when we then cross and see the possibilities, we can actually analyze and see that if we look at the possibility of the sex of children, 50% of children will be female, 50% of children could be male. However, I'm only asking if any child that this couple has, would they be colorblind? And so in this case, we're just simply looking at, did any of the children inherit the colorblind allele? And so to analyze this, we say that 1/4 or 25% of the children will be normal-sighted girls, right here. Next, 1/4 or 25% of the children will be normal-sighted boys. That's because they have an X and a Y. 1/4 or 25% of children will be normal-sighted girls, but they will carry that little N. And then leaving us with this final possibility, 1/4 or 25% of children would be colorblind boys. So this combination would create the possibility of a colorblind child. And so the answer is yes. And this will conclude a brief overview on some example problems for all of the various inheritance patterns presented.